We were perfect together on weekends. Then we moved in, and everything fell apart. If you judged us by our weekends, you'd think we were made for each other. Saturdays started with oat milk, lattes, and smug farmers market purchases we didn't need. Heirloom tomatoes that tasted like tomatoes, candles that smelled like library after the rain. Sundays were for long walks, where we pointed at houses we'd never afford and said things like, one day. We were that couple friends rolled their eyes at. Coordinated grocery lists, inside jokes, matching enthusiasm for documentaries about food fraud. We were good. Good is a dangerous feeling. It's like driving on black ice. Everything looks smooth until you tap the brakes. My name's Aaron. I'm 32, product designer. She's Lena, 30, wardrobe stylist, who swears by color theory the way religion people swear by parables. We'd been together 19 months when the lease conversation started. Not because we were ready in some soul-deep way, but because Lena's roommate got engaged, and my building sent a renewal with a rent hike that made me laugh in a way that didn't sound like laughter. We should live together, she said, half grinning, half terrified. The way you say, jump? On a cliff when you kind of mean, please talk me out of this. I didn't. I said, let's do it. Finding an apartment in our city is a competitive sport where the prize is paying for exposed brick you're not allowed to actually expose. We toured 5 places. The first smelled faintly of despair and carpet cleaner. The second had a view of a brick wall close enough to shake hands with. The third was perfect, until the agent said, cozy, 4 times in 6 minutes. And I realized that was code for, you will never be alone again. We landed on a 1-bedroom in a 1920s building with crown molding and a fire escape that begged to be an herb garden. South light in the mornings, hardwood floors that creaked like they were telling secrets. We signed the lease on a Friday, clinked plastic cups of cheap Prosecco on the kitchen counter, and took a selfie that made us look braver than we felt. Move-in day is a test disguised as an errand. We failed quietly at first. My couch didn't fit the stairwell, her dresser didn't fit the closet, and neither of us fit the idea we'd had of how the other packed. I used labeled bins in a spreadsheet. Lena put sweaters in an IKEA blue bag and called it a thesis on flexibility. We laughed. It was cute then. The first week, the apartment felt like a camp. Mattresses on the floor, pizza on paper plates, big life energy humming under everything. It wasn't until the boxes thinned and the routines thickened that we discovered the thing nobody tells you. Living together isn't just combining stuff, it's combining defaults. Defaults are religion. You don't know you have them until someone else violates them. Here were mine. Toothpaste cap on. Thermostat at 69 at night, 72 in the day. Shoes off at the door. Carpet is a sponge of the world. Dishes rinsed before they hit the sink. 2 types of towels, body and hands. Do not cross the streams. Here were Lena's. Toothpaste cap, wherever gravity wants it. Thermostat set by vibes. Shoes off after sitting down and remembering. Dishes build soaking narratives. Towels are just rectangles with jobs that evolve. These are not crimes. They are tectonic plates. The first week, they rubbed. The second week, they groaned. By week 3, we were measuring the apartment in aftershocks. It started with the thermostat. I run warm. Lena is the human embodiment of bring a sweater. At 3 a.m. on our 5th night, I woke to the sound of the heat clicking on like a dragon clearing its throat. The thermostat glowed 76. I could feel my pores opening in protest. I whispered, "Hey!" She whispered back, "I'm freezing. I'm melting." "Compromise," she said, heroic in the dark. We agreed on 72, which is a number that pleases no one, but gives both parties something to resent. Then came the dish truce. I rinse, she marinates. We agreed to a 24-hour sink statute. If a dish is in there that long, it becomes the property of the person who put it there. We sealed this pact like diplomats. Serious nods, mutual delusion. Our largest early fight was about a rug. Lena bought a Persian-style runner for the hallway. Beautiful, saturated colors. The kind of reds that make you want to say, vermilion. It shed like a long-haired cat, anxious about an exam. I vacuumed every other day. She said I was giving the rug a complex. I said the rug was giving me asthma. We compromised by ignoring it and ordering an air purifier, which hummed like an apology. It was adorable, the way we thought our biggest problem was a rug. The first true nightmare sign arrived on day 12, the great spoon disappearance. By Sunday, we had 2 spoons left. I asked, where did they go? Lena said, genuine. Spoons wander. I discovered 3 in her tote, 2 in her work kit, and 1 in a potted plant. I was checking the soil moisture, don't judge. I bought more spoons. She called me spoon police. I said, I'm not policing, I'm inventorying. She said, same. Here's the thing. I told that story at brunch, and everyone laughed. We laughed too. It's funny when you don't care what a spoon symbolizes. But if you care about predictability, a vanishing spoon is the first draft of chaos. I cared. She cared too, about not being managed by silverware. Another quiet flag. Sleep. Lena is a night moth. I'm a morning crow. In our separate apartments, this was charming. Together, it sounded like this. At 1:12 a.m., a hairdryer whooshing because if I don't do the mask now, I'll forget. At 6:10 a.m., my coffee grinder warned her, we live in a capitalist nightmare with business hours. I need darkness to sleep, she said, pulling the comforter over her head. I need the sun not to judge me, I said, cracking the blinds open like a confession. We bought blackout curtains. We bought a white noise machine that pretended it was a fan. We bought earplugs. We bought peace. Retail. It worked for 5 days. When you move in together, you discover what home means to you by the shapes of your fights. For me, home means control over the small things, so the big things feel possible. For Lena, home means freedom from performance, a place to drop your bag and your guard. Neither is wrong. Neither is compatible without rules. The problem, rules felt to her like cages, and to me like oxygen. We wrote rules anyway. Sundays, no plans before noon. Shoes, off at the door. Swear on the carpet. Dishes, see statute. Sleep, grinder only after 7 a.m. unless under crisis. Spoon amnesty, all spoons forgiven if returned to the drawer by end of week. We taped the list to the fridge. It made us feel adult. It made guests laugh. It did not change our nature. The illusion cracked for real the evening her cat moved in. You will now ask, why wasn't the cat mentioned sooner? Because discussing pets before a move is like discussing children in theory. You imagine scenarios. Reality dismantles your PowerPoint. The cat's name is Miso. Miso is fluffy and dignified and regards me like a man who will never quite learn the language. My apartment had been petless. My childhood had been full of fur and an inhaler. I'm not allergic anymore, I had said bravely, which is the kind of sentence youth writes on a napkin. Within 48 hours, my eyes were freshwater aquariums and my chest sounded like bubble wrap. We bought HEPA filters for every room. We lint-rolled clothing like stagehands. We banned Miso from the bedroom. Miso banned us from boundaries, learning the door handle in a week and letting herself in like a neighbor who returns Tupperware at 2 a.m. This is workable, we said, sneezing in unison. That first month, we still kissed in the kitchen while pasta water boiled and made lists of restaurants to try and apps to delete. We still Netflix bargained. One for her, spooky anthology. One for me, slow documentary where a man in a flannel whispers about woodworking. We still believed the word phase. We were not wrong. We were also not prepared. 2 weeks after move-in, Lena hosted her first small gathering. Small, as defined by my girlfriend, meant 12 people with loud laughter and beautiful shoes, all of whom worked in creative industries that required adjectives like elevated and cinematic. I like people one-on-one. Groups make me feel like a tab in a browser someone will close. I said, let's cap it at 8. She said, 12 is 8 with better lighting. I nodded like a man who intends to go to bed early. I did not go to bed early. The music was not loud. The voices were. The playlist was curated to feel like a train ride through France if the train were inside a candle. Miso stalked the hallway like a host who'd learned to walk in socks. People balanced plates on windowsills and drinks on my newly sanded coffee table, even though I had deployed coasters like landmines. I hovered in the kitchen doing dishes as they appeared, a sous chef to chaos. At midnight, Lena shouted, I love this, and I believed her, which is important because later I would stop. By 1:30, the apartment looked like someone had tried to open a bar in our living room and remembered halfway through they could not legally do that. Lena fell asleep on the couch while I stacked plates, wiped counters, tucked olives into a Tupperware that would never lose their smell. She woke at 2:10, kissed my elbow, and said, You are my favorite person, which is a gold star in the kindergarten of adulthood. The next morning, I asked if we could institute an end time. She said she didn't like policing vibes. I said I didn't like living in a rental nightclub. We agreed. Weeknights, midnight, weekends, 1 a.m. This lasted as long as an ice cube in July. Here's where the dishes war graduated from skirmish to campaign. A week later, Sunday 6 p.m., I came home to the sink doing an impression of modern sculpture. Pans soaking, bowls waiting. Lena's explanation was ontological. The sink is a process. I said, the sink is a place. She said, you don't understand process. I said, you don't understand places. We did the polite version of fighting, where the sentences are calm, but the verbs are armed. We ended with a compromise that sounded like a TED Talk. We will respect each other's thresholds. We meant, if the dishes make me itch, I'll do them without announcing martyrdom. If my tidying makes her feel watched, she'll tell me before it curdles into a sulk. This worked for 4 days, and then human nature did its job. Money arrived like a chaperone no one invited. We had a plan. Split rent 60-40 because I made more. Everything else 50-50. Everything else turned out to be a galaxy. Grocery runs where my list was beans and rice, and hers was a cheese that tastes like a sad lake. Plants. Candles. We said we'd stop and then didn't. Cat food. Premium, because you'd want to be premium if you were a cat. Toilet paper that had a brand narrative. I made a spreadsheet. Lena said, if we die tomorrow, do you want your last act to be reconciling pickles? She offered to manage a shared card. I said, sure, as long as we track categories. She said, of course. Categories turned into a folder in her notes app labeled Vibes. We were officially 2 countries exchanging currency without a central bank. Sleep, the sequel. Lena bought a projector for movie nights that feel like a hug. Our bedroom wall became a screen. It was romantic until Tuesday at 12:40 a.m. when she started a true crime episode, in bed to fall asleep to. I cannot sleep to podcasts about dismemberment. My brain believes it is the dismembered. She said she needed noise. I said I needed silence. We compromised with a nature soundtrack called Calm River at Night. The river, I swear to God, had a frog that coughed at 1:17 a.m. every loop. I learned to hate that frog with a purity monks would admire. Communication shifted too. Before cohabitation, every text was a small offering. A photo of a dog on the train. A meme that said, this is us, without saying it. After, texts became operations. Pick up cumin if you stop at the store. Do we have stamps? Don't forget the package at the door. Love notes turned into logistics. We tried to reverse it on Thursdays by reinstating tiny flirts. 1 flirty text before noon. 1, I appreciate you because tinontrant maltos after. It helped, briefly, like mints after garlic. We signed up for couples therapy sooner than most would admit. Not because we hated each other, but because we could see the slope. Our therapist, Dana, had the softest voice anyone has ever used on purposes. In session 1, she said, name what home means without using the word safe. I said, a place where details are reliable. Lena said, a place where I'm not punished for needing to exhale. Dana nodded like we had said correct answers on a game show, and then gave us homework. Pause before correcting each other. Ask preference or principle, and adopt a ritual that signals, I am choosing you today. We chose a candle we lit at dinner. It worked right up until it made me think about wax strips on wood grain, and made her think about church. Then came the first big breach. My work from home day. I work remote Wednesdays. I design, which is closing your eyes and convincing people you are in fact working while you try to imagine buttons that feel like kindness. Lena's schedule flexes. On my 3rd Wednesday, she announced at 10:30 a.m. The lighting is perfect. I need to do a fitting here at noon. How many people? I asked. Just 3. 3 meant 5. I put on headphones. Misa welcomed everyone with her warbling croon. At 12:14, a rolling rack arrived. At 12:21, a person I'd met twice stood in our kitchen discussing their brand of hot. At 12:35, music started. My meeting at 1 was a usability test with a bank. Halfway through, I heard Lena yell, pinch, like a battlefield medic. My participant asked if everything was okay. I said, fashion? He laughed. We both pretended this was interesting. After, I asked, can we not do fittings on Wednesdays? She said, I pay rent here too. I said, it's not about rent. It's about respecting my work. She said, my work is real. I didn't say it wasn't. You acted like it. I hadn't meant to. That didn't help. That night, we ate in silence. The candle we lit looked like a hostage. The next morning, I found my whiskey decanter empty. It had been used for a look. The decanter, not the whiskey, she said. But also the whiskey. We were celebrating. I felt something in me close a door. I am not innocent here. My sins were small and sharp, sighing while reloading the dishwasher correctly, labeling the spice jars with a label maker that made her hiss. "You're labeling me," setting calendar events titled "Quiet Hours," like I could schedule personality. I left the bathroom fan on too long. I folded her clothes wrong. They're not rectangles, they're opinions. I corrected her parking because I wanted us to live. Friends took sides without admitting it. My best friend Noah said, "You've always been uptight. Maybe she shakes you loose." Her friend Tasha said, "He's controlling. You're shrinking." We were both right and both wrong. Reality is messy enough to be two things at once. The day the neighbors got involved should have been a sitcom episode. Our upstairs neighbor, a retiree named Gloria, with eyebrows like punctuation, knocked at 8:15 a.m. I opened the door with a toothbrush in my mouth. "I can hear your river frog," she said, by way of greeting. He coughs. It's unnerving. I apologized. She peered past me at the herb garden on the fire escape and said, "Basil is a lot like men. You cut them back and they come in stronger." She winked at Lena over my shoulder in a way that said, "Choose violence when needed." I loved Gloria immediately and also resented that our domestic problems had a chorus. Money. Part 2. We missed a utility bill, not because we couldn't pay, because both of us assumed the other had set it to auto-pay. The notice came, pink, like an accusation. We paid, of course. We also fought about systems. I wanted a shared Google sheet with due dates and who's on point. Lena wanted shared responsibility without making me feel like an employee. We settled on a wall calendar. We used it for 6 days. We did date nights like it was our job. Wednesdays, post-fitting armistice, became out of the house, so we remember we like each other. We rotated choosing. Her choices were neon ramen shops and indie theaters, where the dialogue was 70% silence. Mine were quiet wine bars and museum late nights. We enjoyed both. We held hands after. We whispered, "We're okay." We were, in fact, okay. Like a boat is okay, while you can still see the shore. The first crack I couldn't plaster. The closet event. We had one bedroom closet. I offered half. Lena needed 3/4, plus the hall closet, plus a garment rack for seasonal rotation. I relinquished territory like someone negotiating a peace treaty while losing land. Then, on a Thursday, I came home to find my suits and garment bags under the bed. "We needed space," she said. "For what?" I asked. "For who I am," she said. And though it sounds theatrical, I swear she didn't say it like a line. She said it like a truth. We argued, then apologized, then negotiated. I got a freestanding wardrobe in the corner that made the room look like Narnia. I joked about fawns. She laughed, but her eyes stayed flinty. I realized then that space isn't square footage, it's dignity. I'd accidentally told her she was too big for the life we were building. She'd accidentally told me I didn't belong as much as my clothes did. Neither was the intended message. Both landed. We tried new rituals. Sunday mornings, we read to each other for 20 minutes. She chose Joan Didion and sentences that collected in my pockets. I chose James Baldwin and sentences that burnt clean. We cried once at the same sentence and clung to it like proof. We watercolored at the table one night and made a mess that looked like progress. We had sex on the floor and laughed and said the apartment felt like ours again. Then the smoke alarm went off at 2:40 a.m. because a candle sputtered near a dried eucalyptus bundle, design flaw disguised as decor. We scrambled, opened windows, waved towels like surrender flags. Gloria knocked with a mixing bowl for water and said, "This is why I never married. Men and dried plants." Then left us with the bowl and a story to embarrass us eternally. We coughed and laughed until coughing won. In therapy, Dana asked us to list non-negotiables. Mine. A true desk, not the kitchen table. One night a week with no one else in our home. A sink that does not have cultures evolving. Hers. Her cat stays. Friends can drop by. I stop acting like cleanliness is morality. We agreed. We failed. We agreed again. The night the building had a plumbing issue, everything bared itself. The super shut off water 6 p.m. to midnight. Lena announced at 7, Everyone's still coming. Everyone? 7, she said. I bought bottled water like a prepper and stacked it, ashamed. People arrived. They asked to wash hands. I handed them a bottle and a paper towel like a sommelier of disaster. At 11:30, a friend of a friend opened the fridge, took my neatly packed lunch for tomorrow, leftover roast chicken I'd been thinking about since 4 p.m., and said, "Is this up for grabs?" I stood there in socks and said, "No." And the room heard the sound of a boundary hitting tile. He apologized and put it back. I threw it out the next day because I didn't want to eat a memory. We slept back to back, 2 parentheses that didn't touch. Then came the day I found a post-it on the refrigerator that said, "Stop managing me." Lena had underlined managing 3 times. I left one next to it. "Stop making me pick between peace and mildew." We stared at the notes like hostages. We laughed. We cried. We took them down at the same time. We kissed in the kitchen for a long time without talking because words kept getting us in trouble. I loved her. This is important. I loved her fascination with people. The way she could thrift a jacket and tell you its whole century. Her ability to make a room feel like possibility. She loved me. Also important. She loved the way I built a weekend like a feast. My tenderness with kids. The way I would drive across town for the good bread. We were not villains. We were just 2 systems that needed more ports than we had. Our lease said 12 months. By month 3, we were building a calendar in our heads that measured time in. How long can we keep this version from collapsing? Some evenings, the apartment glowed golden, and we thought, forever. Some mornings, the sink sneered, and we thought, sublet. We added one more ritual, because therapy said ritual is a bridge. Every night before sleep, we had to say one thing the other did that day that we appreciated. You refilled the Brita. You texted my mom back when I forgot. You pretended not to see me cry at that dog video and then made tea. This worked better than anything else. It sanded down the day. It let us be nice on purpose, which turns out to be a skill. It was Lena's birthday weekend, which meant 2 things. She deserved joy, and the apartment would be full. I braced myself, like a bridge before a parade. The plan: dinner out Friday, brunch in our place Saturday, casual 10 people, and Sunday, just us. That last line gleamed like a finish line. Friday dinner went beautifully. Everyone wore colors like they'd called each other. The server loved us. Desserts arrived with sparklers in a way that made Lena look lit from inside. I paid. It was a lot. Worth it, I told myself, even as my internal accountant made a face. Back at home, we fell asleep quick, warm with wine and consequence. Saturday, I woke early to prep. Grocery list: fruit, eggs, bacon for the meat people, mushrooms for the not meat people, bread, fancy butter, because I'm a person who believes in butter narratives. I lined up plates. I preheated the oven like an oath. Lena woke at 10:30, birthday privileges, floated through the kitchen in a robe, kissed my shoulder, and said, "You're magic." Then, "Tasha is bringing 4 extra from out of town. That okay?" I paused, spatula midair. "On top of the 10? They're fun," I said. "We have 8 chairs," she said. "Floors are chairs if you believe." I believed in structural engineering. I said nothing because it was her birthday, and because I am a coward sometimes when love wants quiet. People arrived in clusters, bearing flowers and opinions. The apartment swelled. Miso threaded legs like a pro. I scrambled eggs by the dozen. The playlist did its job. Conversations overlapped in a braid. I smiled. I refilled coffee. I pretended not to notice someone using one of our hand towels for a plate. I texted my soul, "We're okay." At noon, someone spilled an entire mimosa on the rug that had shed since Jesus. It bloomed like a new country. Lena said, "No worries," and pressed club soda into it like absolution. I looked away because I could feel my jaw remembering how to ruin things. At 12:20, the front door opened, and 2 people I had never seen entered like they were in a rom-com adding subplot. "Surprise!" Tasha yelled. "They moved to town yesterday!" They hugged Lena. I smiled. One of them put their tote on my newly oiled dining table without a coaster. I breathed in for 4 counts and out for 8, and thought of Dana's handouts. At 12:40, in the kitchen, while loading the dishwasher very quietly, I heard Tasha say, "You did good. This place is very you." Lena said, "Aaron did the boring parts. I did the fun." Everyone laughed. It was not cruel. It was not kind. It was true in a way that made me feel like I had been turned into furniture with arms. At 1:10, I tried to put food away. "Leave it out," someone said. "We're grazers." Grazers is a word people use when they were born without a concept of bacteria. At 1:30, I pushed the door to the bedroom closed. At 1:32, someone opened it. "Bathroom line," she said, darting through. At 1:34, Miso performed a zoomie across the bed that would become a text I sent to Dana at 2 a.m. Around 2, I realized my wallet wasn't on the counter where I'd left it. Not a crisis. I'm a man of many anxiety-born rituals. I checked the bedroom, the entry bowl, the coat pockets, the freezer. Don't ask. Not there. A tiny elevator in my chest descended 1 floor. I walked calmly to Lena and whispered, "Have you seen my wallet?" She shook her head, then announced, "Everyone? Missing wallet adventure." Like we were at summer camp. I wanted to be swallowed by the rug. "We found it behind the couch under a tote." "I must have knocked it," someone said. Not apologetic, not guilty, just narrating. I smiled. My heart restarted. I laughed because the alternative would ruin Lena's day and start a war with guests who would talk about me when I left rooms forever. I am strategic in petty ways, and that was one. At 3, the last humans left. The apartment looked like we'd thrown a charity auction called Save the Plates. Lena hugged me, sweaty with joy. "That was the best brunch," she said into my shirt. I hugged her back. "It was. You were amazing. You too. I love these people." "I know." We cleaned for an hour. Quiet healing. I threw out half-eaten fruit. I'm not a monster. It went to compost. Wiped the table with love. Vacuumed glitter that will live here longer than our lease. We curled up at 5 to watch nothing and be nothing. Lena fell asleep on my chest. I thought, Sunday is ours. At 7:02 p.m., her phone buzzed. She lifted her head, smiled at the notification, and said, "Oh, people are going to Kingfisher. Come?" I said. I thought tonight was just us. She made a face like a kid told vegetables are eternal. "It's my birthday weekend," I said. "I know. Come for one drink?" "I'm tired. I'll go for one and be right back." I pictured 1 a.m. I pictured the Frog River and Gloria's eyebrows. I said, "Okay, 1. She promised 10 hours. I am an adult who believes promises. At 11:12, she texted, "So fun," with a picture that would be handsome if I did not hate it. At 12:07, heading out soon. At 12:58, we got fries. At 1:40, I turned my phone face down and said out loud, "I am not the police." She came home at 2:20, a joy comet trailing apologies. "It was so good," she said, removing her shoes in the hall like I'd trained her at SeaWorld. I should have texted more. "It's fine," I said, which is married too. "We will talk tomorrow," and lives in the house. This will be remembered. We went to sleep like people whose bodies know they are mad, even if their mouths shut up. Sunday morning, I made coffee. She came into the kitchen wearing my sweatshirt and her best face. "I'm sorry," she said. I nodded, because I appreciated that. "I should have come home earlier," she said. I nodded harder, because that sentence was a miracle. Then she said, "It's just, I feel alive with a crowd sometimes. This place feels like my place on those nights." I said nothing, because the sentence that flew to my mouth was, "and like not my place." I swallowed it. She looked small suddenly. I poured coffee into the mug she calls the therapist cup, because it makes hard conversations easier. "Can we talk money?" I said, because my lizard brain is a clown that juggles fire during tense moments. "From last night?" she asked, fear and annoyance sharing a stool. "From everything. Birthday dinner, groceries, the utility. I'm happy to cover more. I just need to know we're not sliding." She tensed. "On my birthday weekend?" I said. "I'm not asking for a Venmo memo titled Audacity. I just want to put it in the sheet," she said. "The sheet is your love language." "Yes," I said. "And yours is glitter." We both smiled. The tension sat down and ate some eggs. We compromised. She'd take the next 2 grocery runs. I'd eat fries at midnight willingly once a month. We kissed. We meant it. We lit the dinner candle at noon because rules are toys when you're trying to save yourselves. And then, the key incident. At 3 p.m., I realized my spare key wasn't on the hook. Not the main, the spare. I check weird things when my body is tired. It's a self-soothing audit. The hook was naked where the key had hung since move-in. "Did you move my spare?" I called. "Oh," she said. Tasha needed one last night while we went out because she had to come back to grab her jacket. I gave her yours. And? She has it, Lena said. She'll drop it this week. My jaw clicked. So right now, a person I barely know has a key to our home. She's not a stranger, Lena said, bristling. She's my not stranger, I said. Aaron, it was late. She's trustworthy. Trustworthy is not the point. Then what is? Boundaries. Safety. You think my friend is going to rob us? I think I didn't consent. She winced at that word, which we had both learned in therapy belonged in more rooms than we thought. We spiraled. I sounded like a dad. She sounded like a teenager. It was not our best. It ended with me saying, change the locks, which in a rental is a suggestion and a threat. She said, I'll get the key back today, and texted like her thumbs were firefighters. She did get it back by 6 p.m. Tasha arrived with a compliment and an apology that served as cover for not being sorry. I didn't know he'd be weird about it, she said, smiling like she wasn't throwing a dart. I'm not weird, I said, weirdly. She left quickly. I sat down like my joints had opinions. We were quiet the rest of the day. The candle remained unlit, as if it, too, understood we were two horses pulling in opposite directions. That night, Lena cried, the kind where the face gets red and small, and the sound is a hurt animal. I feel like I'm shrinking to fit your rules, she said, not accusing, just telling a weather report. I feel like I'm mopping behind your freedom, I said, not accusing, just naming a job. We held each other like people who didn't know if they had enough glue. We made a list called Stability. 2 columns. Hers, mine. Hers. Drop-bys limited to 3 hours. No giving out keys without asking. I stop implying her friends are toddlers. I agree to 1 late night a week without a curfew. Mine. Dishes get attention before bed. Not perfect, just a path. No work calls during her fittings. Headphones or coffee shop. I stop rearranging the living room like a Tetris game with OCD. I learned to say, leave it about the rug. We both initialed the bottom like a contract. We both felt childish and proud. For 3 weeks, we were good. Shockingly good. We got smug again. We posted a photo of Miso napping in the herb garden with a caption that read like a truce. We hosted a small dinner where people left at 10:30, and I felt love like a tide. We had sex in the morning with the light on, and I thought, we will tell our children about this apartment. Then the email arrived from my job. 3 days a week back in office, mandatory. Commute, 65 minutes each way on a train that smells like regret. We'll make it cozy, Lena said, rubbing my back. We'll pack lunches, we'll be wholesome, we'll be insufferable. She meant it kindly. I bought a monthly transit pass and told myself this was a chapter. My first week back, I woke at 5:45, made coffee, ground too loud. Gloria's frog coughed in solidarity, I swear. Left quietly, and returned at 7:10 p.m. to a living room full of fabrics and friends. Quick pinning session, Lena said. I smiled like a man whose jaw is a hinge. I worked at the kitchen counter, while laughter swelled and pins clinked in a jar. At 9:40, one friend asked, "Can you try this on? You're Aaron-sized." I said, "I live here, I'm off the clock." She laughed. I laughed like a man reading, "Ha ha," from a teleprompter. At 10:15, the apartment was ours again. At 10:18, Lena fell asleep on the couch with a straight pin in her hair like a flag. I took it out. I tucked her in. I stood in the doorway of the bedroom and felt like a guest. The next morning, the storage unit downstairs flooded. Old building, old pipes. My wardrobe, the Narnia, sat in 2 inches of water, like a ship that decided not to. Suits soaked, shoes ruined. The super shrugged like a man who has shrugged his whole life. "Happens," he said. I said, "It shouldn't," he said. "Tell that to 1923. I texted Lena. She was supportive, offered to help, offered her steamer like a chaplain. Then she said, "At least it's just clothes." And I said something small and cruel and true. "Not to you." She flinched. I apologized immediately. We stood in the wet room together and smelled wool dyeing. She cried. I cried. We were very tired. That night, I fell asleep fast. I woke at 2:11 a.m. to voices, soft but present, in the living room. I lay there, listening. Laughter. 2. 3. I put on sweats and walked out. Lena sat on the floor with Tasha and another friend. Open wine, candles, a mood. She looked up with guilt already in her face. "You were asleep," she said quickly. "We couldn't go to sleep. The movie was too much." "It's 2 a.m. I said, which is not a moral stance, and felt like one. "We're whispering," she said. We were not whispering. I went to the bathroom. I looked at my face and saw a person I didn't like. Small, rigid, lonely, in a house full of people. Back in bed, I didn't sleep. At 3:22, the door closed softly. Lena slid in. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I lost track. I stared at the ceiling. "I feel like this place belongs to everyone but me." She was quiet. Then, "I feel like this place belongs to your rules." We lay there like law and chaos. We did not touch. The next morning, we made eggs separately, which is a metaphor they should print in premarital handbooks. She left at 10 to go to a shoot. I stayed, cleaned with vengeance, and thought about leases. 12 months is a number and a sentence. At noon, Gloria knocked and handed me a small plant. "For your windowsill," she said. "It doesn't need much. It just needs to not be moved every 5 minutes." I laughed. "Are you spying on us?" "Walls are ears here," she said. "And I'm old. I collect stories. You'll be okay if you decide to be, or you won't. And you'll also be okay." Then she said, "You look like a man who needs a nap." She was right. I napped. I dreamed I lived alone in a studio with one spoon and perfect peace, and woke up crying because I also dreamed Lena wasn't in my life, and the silence in the dream felt like a crime. That evening, I wrote an email to our therapist with the subject line, "We need more glue." We booked 2 sessions a week for a month. We did the work, or tried. We practiced saying "I want" instead of "you always." We took turns building the Saturday. No vetoes. Her Saturday. Flea market, friends pop-up, crowded picnic. Mine, library, quiet noodles, a walk at dusk, no plan beyond sunset. Both were good. Both asked the other to pretend to be a slightly different person. We did it with grace. We did it with gritted teeth. Both are love. By month 5, our friends had stopped saying, "How's living together?" with sparkling eyes, and started saying, "How are you two holding up?" with hospice eyes. We answered, "We're learning," which was true, and also a euphemism for, "We have invented a spreadsheet for fights." Then the lease addendum arrived. The building was renovating the roof deck. Construction would be 8 a.m., 4 p.m. for 3 months. Saturday, too. Drills like morning birds, dust like seasoning. We read the email in silence. "We can do this," Lena said, jaw square like a boxer. "We can," I said, already searching short-term rentals month to month. Already doing math I shouldn't. The first morning of construction, the wall vibrated at 8:02. The frog coughed. Miso hid under the bed and refused to come out until 5 p.m. We both worked with headphones and faces like customer service. At lunch, we ate standing up at the counter while saws whined. "We should go to my sister's next weekend," Lena said. "We should go anywhere," I said. We smiled. We meant it. We were 2 people holding a boat steady in weather with spoons. Then, as if the cosmos wanted in on the joke, my mother visited. I should have known inviting my mother was a mistake. Not because I don't love her. I do, in that complicated, tightly coiled way adult children love their parents. But because she is a woman who cannot enter a room without auditing it. She notices dust the way a detective notices motive. And Lena, who thrives on improvisation and creative chaos, was about to meet a hurricane disguised as maternal concern. Mom arrived on a Friday evening, roller suitcase in one hand, grocery bag in the other. Because you can never trust what people keep in their refrigerators. She hugged me, inspected Lena like a museum curator, then set down her bag and immediately opened our fridge. "Oh, honey," she said, "you don't have enough vegetables." Lena smiled politely, but her eyes flickered like a warning light. I had planned this visit to show that Lena and I were thriving. We had a guest bed, air mattress, matching mugs, plants that hadn't died yet. But within 5 minutes, my mom had asked, "Do you always leave your shoes right by the door? Why is the rug shedding so much? Is that cat allowed on the counter?" Lena's lips pressed into a smile so tight it could have cut glass. Dinner that night was supposed to be celebratory. Instead, it turned into a battlefield of passive-aggressive maneuvers. My mom insisted on cooking her special chicken, and Lena insisted she didn't need help. Within an hour, I was caught between 2 women wielding cutting boards like shields. When the chicken came out slightly overcooked, my mom muttered, "Well, not everyone understands timing." Lena countered, "Not everyone measures love in poultry temperature." I pretended to choke on a green bean to change the subject. The night ended with Lena curled on the couch, miso in her lap, scrolling silently on her phone. while my mom asked me privately in the kitchen, "Are you sure about this? She seems volatile." Volatile. The word detonated inside me because I knew Lena would say the same about my mother if she had the chance. I mumbled something about stress, about the roof construction, about adjustment. My mom patted my arm like I'd just confessed to failing a class. The following week, Lena decided we needed a refresh. She called 2 friends, movers in everything but profession, and together, they rearranged half the apartment while I was at work. I came home to find the couch in the opposite corner, my desk relocated to the hallway, and the wardrobe that survived the flood now shoved against the kitchen wall like a condemned building. "It feels more open," she said, arms spread like Vanna White. "It feels like someone robbed us and redecorated with the loot," I said. She frowned. "I thought you'd like it. You're always talking about flow." "Yes, flow. Not demolition." It escalated quickly. I accused her of erasing my space. She accused me of treating the apartment like a museum. We shouted. Miso bolted under the bed. At one point, Lena threw a pillow across the room, not at me, but hard enough to make a point. When it was over, we sat in separate rooms, the silence so loud I could hear Gloria upstairs humming through the floorboards. The irony of living together. You can break up with someone in your heart long before the lease lets you leave. By month 6, that's where we were. We hadn't said it out loud, but the fights were longer than the truces, the apologies thinner than the resentments. The list on the fridge was now a collage of passive-aggressive notes. "Please rinse dishes. Stop using my mug. Thermostat roulette wheel." One night, after another pointless argument about whether the bedspread was neutral or depressing, Lena sighed and said, "I don't think we make sense here." I nodded, because denying it felt like gaslighting both of us. But we had 6 months left on the lease. Breaking it would cost a fortune. Subletting was risky. So we lived in a truce carved out of exhaustion. Co-tenants, co-survivors. Not really a couple. We divided the apartment like a demilitarized zone. I claimed the desk and kitchen counter. She claimed the couch and bedroom closet. The living room was neutral territory, though Miso ruled it like a monarch. We still went through the motions, date nights, couples therapy, candlelit dinner, but it felt like we were acting in a play we'd forgotten the lines to. It came in the simplest way. Laundry. We'd agreed early on that we'd each do our own, because combining felt too intimate, too complicated. But one Sunday, Lena dumped a load in without checking the machine. When I went to switch mine in later, I found half my shirts now streaked with blue dye from a scarf she'd tossed in. "Sorry," she said, not looking up from her phone. "Sorry? These are ruined." "They're just shirts. They're mine." That word, mine, cracked something open. Because it wasn't about shirts. It was about space, time, dishes, keys, rules, noise, money, mothers, movers. It was about the fact that nothing felt like mine anymore. I said quietly, "I can't do this." Lena looked up, eyes wide, then closed like shutters. She nodded once. Me neither. And just like that, the fight was over. We didn't break the lease. We lived out the remaining months like roommates, polite and civil, making small talk in the kitchen, dividing bills without drama. We still had moments, watching a movie in silence, cooking a meal together without fighting. But they felt like nostalgia, not hope. When the lease ended, we split our stuff without fireworks. She kept the rug, the couch, and of course Miso. I took my desk, my wardrobe, still warped from the flood, and the plant Gloria had given me. On the last night, we sat on the empty living room floor, drinking wine out of mismatched mugs. "We were good before we moved in," she said softly. I nodded. We were. We clinked mugs like a toast and left it at that. Moving out of that apartment felt less like leaving a home and more like escaping a sinking ship. The day Lena and I split the keys, there wasn't a fight. No tears. No last-ditch plea. Just 2 people handing each other cardboard boxes and avoiding eye contact. She ordered an Uber for herself and Miso. I loaded my few salvaged belongings into a borrowed SUV. We didn't even hug goodbye. The silence between us had grown too heavy to carry one last time. My new place was a studio across town. Cheaper, smaller, one of those apartments where if you stretch your arms too wide, you'll knock over a lamp. But it was mine. My mess. My quiet. My thermostat. That first night, I sat cross-legged on the floor, eating takeout lo mein straight from the carton. No plates to fight about. No spoons missing. Just me, chopsticks, and the hum of my own fridge. I swear the silence had a shape, Awkward at first, then slowly comforting. I went to bed on a mattress without a frame and thought, I'm free. Then I rolled over, saw the empty space beside me and thought, I'm alone. Freedom and loneliness are twins. It just depends which one is awake. It's strange how small things haunt you after a breakup. I'd be rinsing a dish and hear her voice say, it's soaking, not dirty. I'd fold a towel and remember how she hated my military rectangles. I'd buy groceries and skip over things she loved, the fancy butter, the little jars of olives, because buying them felt like inviting her back into my kitchen. One Sunday, I woke up late and almost texted her, coffee? It was muscle memory. My hand hovered over the keyboard for a full minute before I put the phone down. She was probably at the farmer's market, laughing with friends, holding a bag of heirloom tomatoes that would outlive me. 2 weeks later, I ran into Gloria, our upstairs neighbor, outside the old building. She was walking a tiny dog that looked like a dust mop. She squinted at me, then smiled. You're the one with the spoons, she said. That was me, I admitted. Not there anymore? Nope, new place. She nodded sagely, as if she had predicted it all along. Then she said, sometimes two good people don't make a good home. I stood there, floored, because she had just summed up months of therapy and fights in 9 words. The first month in my studio, I overcompensated. I vacuumed twice a week. I alphabetized my spices. I folded laundry with a precision NASA would admire. It was like I was proving to myself that I was right all along, that order is survival. But then I noticed something. Without Lena's chaos, my life was sterile. Predictable, yes. Peaceful, sure. But lifeless in its own way. I missed someone dropping a tote bag in the wrong place, or playing music too loud, or inviting friends without warning. What I didn't miss was feeling managed, cornered, erased. Missing the good didn't mean forgetting the bad. One evening in month 2 of my freedom, I got a text from an unknown number. Do you still have the air purifier? Miso keeps sneezing. It was Lena. I stared at the message for a long time, not because I didn't know the answer. Of course, I still had it, sitting in the corner humming like a ghost, but because I didn't know if replying would reopen something I had barely closed. Finally, I typed, yeah, you can pick it up anytime. She came the next day. We hugged awkwardly at the door, like cousins who hadn't seen each other in years. She looked tired, but still radiant. In that way, Lena always carried herself, a mix of brilliance and mess. Miso poked her head out of the carrier and meowed like she remembered me. You look settled, Lena said, glancing around my neat little studio. You look alive, I said, because she did. We didn't linger. She thanked me, I handed her the purifier, and she left. The room felt colder after. I kept living. I kept building routines that belonged only to me. And I realized a few things. Compatibility isn't about love alone. We loved each other, no question. But our definitions of home were too different to coexist. Rules are invisible until they clash. You don't know how sacred your toothpaste cap habits are until someone treats them like a suggestion. Love doesn't survive every environment. We thrived in coffee shops and weekend dates. We withered under one roof. And the hardest one, sometimes failure is not trying harder, but staying too long. I heard through mutual friends that Lena moved into a loft with 2 other stylists. Apparently, she was happier. Late nights, clothes everywhere, endless drop-ins. Her element. I didn't feel bitter. I didn't feel jealous. I felt relieved. Because for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like we'd failed. It felt like we had finally admitted the truth. We were perfect in doses, but toxic in permanence. I met someone new eventually. Different energy. Calmer. We haven't moved in together yet, and we won't rush it. Because if this whole nightmare taught me anything, it's that sharing a lease is not just about rent. It's about sharing oxygen, defaults, silence. And that can either build a home or tear it apart.